There's a girl sitting in the back of a classroom, quietly sketching the wind. The teacher calls it distraction. Her classmates ignore her. But on the page, she's drawing the invisible. Her pencil doesn't just trace motion, it understands it. No one's taught her this, no one's asked. But something inside her sees what others don't, a whisper behind her eyes. Genius doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it hides in silence, in exile, in grief. Sometimes it gets dismissed, punished, medicated, or ignored, but it never disappears, it waits. Leonardo da Vinci died thinking he had failed. He left behind thousands of pages filled with inventions, ideas, anatomical sketches, riddles. Most of it unpublished, many of them unfinished. His last written words, "I have offended God and mankind because my work did not reach the quality it should have." But Leonardo's genius wasn't in perfection, it was in attention. As a boy, he would walk for hours just to observe a bird's wing in motion. He bought caged animals just to let them go. In one forgotten notebook, he wrote, "My body will not be a tomb for other creatures." He studied the world not to master it, but to set it free. That same freedom bled into the way he thought. His journals contained equations beside doodles, flying machines beside grocery lists, notes to kings beside whispers to his companion Salai. "No more wars. I surrender. I want to rest." These were not the words of a myth. They were the words of a man trying to live in a world too narrow for how wide he could see. Carl Jung's world cracked open in 1913. After parting ways with Freud, he began having visions. Spirals of light, ancient gods. A bearded man with wings who called himself Feynman. Jung wasn't hallucinating, he was listening. He kept a journal, now called the Red Book, where he painted what he saw, mandalas, mirrors, symbols emerging from someplace beyond logic. He didn't write to impress anyone, he wrote to survive himself. Later, Jung would say, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And maybe that's the line the world keeps missing. Genius doesn't always look upward. Sometimes it descends into memory, into madness, into myth. Richard Feynman discovered one of the most important equations in quantum physics because he was bored. One day in the Cornell cafeteria, he watched a plate wobble through the air. It meant nothing, it solved nothing. But he followed it, he played with the math. He spun the question around in his mind, not to get an answer, but to hear the music in it. That pointless curiosity became the seed of a Nobel Prize. Feynman didn't chase success, he chased wonder. His lectures were filled with jokes, his notebooks filled with doodles. He once said, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." So he didn't pretend, he didn't worship his own brilliance. He just kept listening to the voice that said, "Look closer." Jung looked inward, Leonardo looked to nature, Feynman looked sideways. They didn't follow the same path, but they followed the same whisper. And it took them all beyond the visible. And maybe you've heard that whisper too. Maybe you've seen a pattern no one else noticed, asked a question no one else dared. Maybe you've been told you were too sensitive, too strange, too slow, too much. But that quiet ache behind your eyes, the one that watches, that wonders, that waits, it's not a flaw, it's the beginning of genius. Everyone wants to believe that genius feels like flight, like wings, like certainty breaking open into light. But what if it doesn't? What if it feels like silence, like grief? Like a mind that runs too fast in a world that keeps telling it to slow down? What if genius doesn't feel like freedom at all? Leonardo da Vinci could see what others couldn't, but he couldn't always finish what he saw. He abandoned more works than he completed, not because he didn't care, but because his mind outran the canvas. His notebooks are full of questions with no answers, machines with no builders, ideas with no audience. In one letter nearly lost to history, he confessed to Salai, "No more wars. I surrender. I want to rest." And yet he never stopped. Even when kings withdrew their favor, even when the world moved on without him, Leonardo kept sketching. During a little-known journey through Armenia, far from the courts and the commissions, he filled pages with landscapes no one had asked him to draw. He studied the sky, the curve of wind, the weight of falling water. It didn't matter who would see it. What mattered was that it existed, and that he had seen it. Carl Jung didn't escape the cage either. After his rupture with Freud, his visions deepened. In one, he met a wounded man in a forest, carrying a dead bird whose feathers still shimmered. Jung reached for it, and it turned to light in his hands. That image haunted him for years, not because it was madness, but because it was truth. He was that man, the healer who could only guide others by confronting his own wound. In his red book, he wrote of spirals pulling him toward what he feared most. Of mirrors that didn't reflect his face, but archetypes, ancient patterns of the soul. He didn't think this made him brilliant. He thought it might be destroying him. But still, he painted, he wrote, he followed the visions, not because they made sense, but because they were real. And that's the paradox of the mind. What we fear might be what we need to become whole. Feynman wore brilliance like a joke. He danced through equations, cracked safes at Los Alamos, played the bongos on stage. But when his wife Arlene died, he shattered. For months he said nothing. Then in a sealed letter never meant to be read, he wrote, "You dead are so much better than anyone else alive." He continued to work, to teach, to play. But behind the laughter, he was still holding that letter, still talking to someone who wasn't there. And in that grief, something strange happened. He stopped trying to be important. He let go of the need to solve grand problems. And in that surrender, he began to follow curiosity again. It wasn't purpose that gave him genius, it was freedom. Maybe you felt it too, not the flight, but the cage. Maybe your thoughts feel too heavy to carry. Maybe the questions keep coming and no one seems to want the answers. Maybe you've been told to calm down, to focus, to be realistic. And maybe you've started to believe them. But the truth is, most geniuses didn't feel like visionaries. They felt like misfits, outsiders, quiet catastrophes, trying to make sense of the noise inside them. And here's what the world won't say: that discomfort you're carrying, that friction in your mind, that weight in your chest. It's not weakness. It's the sound of your wings pressing against the bars. And you haven't failed because they haven't opened yet. You've just been learning what they're for. Genius isn't what you know, it's how you see. Not just with your eyes, but with the mind behind them. With the part of you that draws connections others overlook. That hears questions hiding beneath answers. That finds music in a shadow. That sees shape where others see noise. It often starts unnoticed. A thought you can't explain. A hunch you can't shake. A pattern others ignore that you feel must mean something. It doesn't come with certainty, it comes with pull. And if you listen closely, it feels like standing in front of a mirror you didn't know was there. Leonardo da Vinci didn't chase brilliance, he chased connection. His notebooks weren't archives, they were living dreams. A single page might hold a sketch of a water vortex, a note on human fear, a half-finished flying machine, and a recipe for varnish. Nothing was too mundane, nothing too sacred. Everything belonged. He once observed that the pattern of blood vessels mirrored the branches of a tree, that the way a river bends echoed the swirl of a woman's hair. For Leonardo, truth wasn't a single line. It was a spiral, an unfolding, a garden with no fences, just doors. That's what genius sees, not perfection, but relationship, the link between things, the breath behind form. The bird in the mirror. Carl Jung didn't look outward for truth, he turned inward. He practiced something radical, active imagination, where he would close his eyes, descend into dream, and meet the unconscious on its own terms. He didn't interpret the symbols, he spoke with them. One day he met Philemon, a bearded man with wings and sapphire eyes. Philemon told him things Jung had never considered. Later, Jung would say Philemon was wiser than he was, that the ideas came from beyond him, that they were given, not invented. This was not delusion, it was dialogue. He understood what mystics had known for centuries. The unconscious is not a dungeon, it's a cathedral. And the voices that live there are not to be feared, but followed. Dogen once wrote, "To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be awakened by all things." Jung forgot what he was supposed to be, and in that forgetting remembered who he truly was. Richard Feynman approached truth with mischief. He didn't see facts, he saw dance. When he mapped the behavior of subatomic particles, he didn't use words, he drew. His diagrams weren't math scribbles, they were visual symphonies. Arcs and curves that made invisible particles move in real space. He once said he loved nature because it couldn't be fooled. You can know the name of a bird, he said, but that's not the same as knowing the bird. And when you watched him work, you realized he wasn't trying to explain the universe. He was trying to feel it. Genius thinks with its hands, genius follows mystery. Genius doesn't force the world to speak, it listens until it does. And that means you've already touched it. If you've ever stared at something until it began to mean more than it should, if you've ever felt that pull, that there's something here instinct, then you've already stepped through the mirror. A refugee child in a crowded shelter once rewired a broken fan using scraps from a flashlight. No education, no blueprint, just vision. No one gave her permission to think like that. She didn't ask. The mirror didn't care where she came from. It just showed her what was already inside. Genius is not where you go, it's how you look. It's the garden behind your eyes. And every time you stop to trace the shape of wonder, the bird inside the mirror shifts. It's watching. It's waiting. It's you. Not every question will be answered. Not every idea will be understood. But sometimes when you let go of needing certainty, something greater begins to move. Transformation isn't always visible. Sometimes it happens in silence, in exile, in the spaces where the world can't see you. And that's where genius begins to take root, not above the surface, but beneath it. Like light building beneath a wing before flight. Leonardo da Vinci was cast out of Milan during the French invasion. The fresco he was painting cracked and faded. His patrons fled, his name lost power, but he didn't stop. Alone, wandering in Armenia, he sketched the wind, he drew machines no one would build, studied feathers no one would read about for centuries. Not because it was important, but because it was beautiful. In the margins of one of his notebooks, he wrote a line no one noticed. Observe the flight of the bird and you will understand everything. That wasn't instruction, that was revelation. The bird didn't fly because it knew how. It flew because it trusted lift. Carl Jung's transformation came from descent, not ascent. In one vision, he stood at a crossroads where two spirals of light wound into darkness. One path led to clarity, the other to madness, and he walked both. He painted what he saw, mandalas, flames, mirrors. In one image, a dead bird lay in a man's hands. As the man wept, the bird began to glow. Jung didn't share this work for years. He was afraid the world would think he was broken, but in truth he was becoming whole. He later said there is no coming to consciousness without pain, and he meant it. Because to be conscious is to feel everything, and to still keep going. Feynman never claimed to be brave. After Arlene's death, he retreated into silence. He wrote her a letter and never mailed it. He stopped chasing importance. He stopped trying to be the next big mind in physics. And in that release, something quiet happened. He began to follow joy again, curiosity, the pleasure of finding things out. His Nobel-winning work was born not from ambition, but from freedom. He played. He trusted questions that made no sense. He gave himself permission to follow what felt alive. And in doing so, he taught the rest of us what science could look like when it was honest. A woman in Bogota once built a radio from scrap wires and foil tape to hear her sister's voice again. Not because she was an engineer, because she missed someone. And that missing made her invent. She didn't think of it as brilliance. But that's what it was, not grand, not planned. Just light rising beneath the wing. That's what genius feels like. Not certainty, not confidence. Not clarity, but trust. The trust that even in silence something is growing. That the bird hasn't flown yet, but the wind is shifting. And maybe you're there right now, at the edge, still in the cage. Still doubting, still grieving, still wondering if any of it means anything. But it does, it all does, because genius doesn't arrive with lightning. It rises like light, quiet, patient, already moving under your skin. And when you're ready to open your wings, you'll realize they were never broken. They were just waiting for you to believe they could hold the sky. There's a place where the mind cannot lead you, a space beyond answers, beyond categories, beyond the need to understand. It isn't built by logic, it isn't reached through force. And yet every genius who's ever mattered has walked through it, silently, uncertainly, entirely alone. This is the hidden garden. Leonardo da Vinci found his way there when the world stopped listening, when the courts fell silent, when the commissions dried up, when the applause faded. That's when he began drawing the anatomy of dreams, the tendons of birds, the spiral shapes of moving water, not for kings, not for currency, for the garden, for the space where observation becomes worship. He believed that nature held secrets too subtle for language. That truth revealed itself not through control, but through attention. In a note buried deep in his journal, he wrote, "Look at the light on the wings of a dragonfly." There is no formula for that, and still he tried. Not to solve it, to honor it. Carl Jung didn't seek the garden. He fell into it. After years of visions, after the spirals and flames and symbols in his red book, he found something quieter on the other side, peace. Not the kind that comes from knowing, but the kind that comes from accepting mystery. He realized that his dreams weren't puzzles, they were prayers. That Philemon wasn't just a figure in his mind. It was a mirror, a guide. A reminder that wisdom doesn't always come from the top of the mountain. Sometimes it comes from below. From the places you tried to forget. From the bird you thought had died, fluttering again, low to the ground, guiding you deeper in. Feynman's garden was laughter, rhythm, color. He started painting after Arlene died. He wasn't good at it, that wasn't the point. He drew because it made him feel again. Because his hands needed to move. Because play had become sacred. In a notebook found decades later, he wrote, "I wanted to see if I could capture the thing that makes it all worth seeing." He wasn't talking about light. He was talking about meaning. Genius, when left unchained, always returns to wonder. There's a woman in Morocco who teaches physics with chalk on a dirt wall. She draws particles in the sand, diagrams with sticks. Her students ask questions in 3 languages. She answers with her hand. Her classroom is a garden, not because it's green, because it grows the invisible. This is what thinking like a genius really means. Not proving something, not performing intelligence, but listening, honoring what arises. Trusting what doesn't make sense yet. Knowing there is more and choosing to stay long enough to let it bloom. The bird has not flown away. It's just resting in the branches. You might not hear it right now. You might think you've lost it. But the silence is part of the song. The pause is part of the flight. The mirror is still there, waiting for your eyes to return to it. And the garden, it's closer than you think. It begins where you stop pretending to be certain. And it opens the moment you kneel in awe. This was never just about Leonardo, or Jung, or Feynman. It was about you. From the beginning, the bird was not theirs. It was yours. The mirror they stood before, the one that showed them what no one else could see, you've stood before it too. Maybe not in a cathedral, maybe not in a laboratory, maybe in your kitchen at 3 a.m., staring at a question no one else thought to ask. Maybe in the silence after being told you were too much, too weird, too sensitive. Maybe in the ache that followed you anyway. That's where genius begins, not with certainty, but with a flicker, a whisper, a refusal to unsee what you've already seen. We keep thinking genius looks like confidence, like answers, like ease, but look again. Leonardo died believing he had failed. Jung questioned his sanity. Feynman followed a spinning plate that no one else cared about. None of them were chasing status. They were chasing something else, something older. A voice behind the eyes, a light beneath the wing. They didn't become geniuses because the world said they were. They became geniuses because they kept going even when the world didn't understand. And that means this isn't a story of exceptional people. This is a story of what happens when you stop pretending not to know what you've always known. Because here's the secret: genius doesn't arrive fully formed. It becomes inside you when you notice what no one else notices, follow what no one else values, listen when everyone else turns down the volume. To think like a genius is not to be perfect. It's to ask even when there's no answer, to stay curious even when it's inconvenient, to create even when you're afraid it won't matter. It's to walk into the garden. It's to speak with the mirror. It's to open the cage from the inside. Maybe your bird hasn't sung yet, that's fine. But today, right now, it's shifting, breathing, remembering its wings. So don't wait for the world to call you brilliant. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait until it makes sense. Write the thing, ask the question, follow the whisper, let the bird fly. Because genius isn't somewhere else. It's you, it always was.